The world of modern celebrity is built upon an intricate web of carefully constructed illusions, where every single frame, every soft-focus lens shift, and every meticulously placed artifact is designed to telegraph a specific narrative of effortless perfection to an audience increasingly grown skeptical of the gloss. In an era dominated by hyper-saturated digital feeds, the art of the public rebrand has become a high-stakes game of survival for those whose very currency is public attention. Yet sometimes the mechanics of these illusions become so visible that they achieve the exact opposite of their intended effect, plunging the viewer into a state of profound bewilderment rather than admiration. Imagine stepping into a cinematic vignette that feels less like an authentic glimpse into a lived reality and more like an avant-garde European art film from the early 1980s, a sequence of detached, dreamlike images where time seems to slow down and the protagonist, with a deliberate, haunting theatricality, through a landscape that looks entirely pristine yet utterly devoid of genuine life or spontaneous motion. There is a strange, unsettling quality to a scene where nature itself appears to have been thoroughly sanitized, washed clean of the very elements that give it substance and grounding, presenting an idealized cornucopia that exists only within the boundaries of a perfectly lit studio set or a highly curated digital window. It is within this bizarre intersection of high-end lifestyle curation and profound narrative disconnect that we begin our exploration today, pulling back the heavy velvet curtains on a spectacle that has left seasoned observers, media analysts, and ordinary viewers alike scratching their heads in absolute fascination as they try to decode a message that seems to defy the basic rules of modern public relations and brand management. Before we dive deeper into the labyrinth of clues, contrasting strategies, and the high-stakes chess game playing out behind the scenes of global media, take a brief moment to ensure you are fully connected with us by subscribing to this channel, ensuring you never miss an episode of our deep structural breakdowns into the worlds of fame, influence, and the hidden mechanics of power. To truly understand the surreal nature of the imagery currently captivating the public imagination, one must look closely at the sheer absence of reality within what is purported to be an organic, down-to-earth celebration of the natural world, a visual display where the traditional markers of labor and authenticity have been replaced by an almost clinical perfection. When an individual known across the globe for high-stakes drama and international headlines suddenly transitions into the role of an idealized Earth Mother, drifting serenely through a sun-dappled landscape while clad in pristine white trousers and a pale, spotless shirt. The contrast with the gritty reality of everyday existence becomes instantly jarring. There is an undeniable comedy, a hilarious absurdity even, in witnessing a bountiful harvest of seasonal and out-of-season produce presented in a rustic wicker basket where not a single scrap of mud, not a speck of dust, and not a solitary imperfection can be found on any surface. As if the carrots and heirloom vegetables had been polished by a team of Hollywood set designers prior to the camera rolling. The protagonist moves through this space not as a worker of the land, but as the absolute star of her own self-contained cinematic universe, pausing to gaze wistfully into the middle distance with a look of intense, unexplained meaning, before turning toward the lens with a calculated precision that breaks the fourth wall yet offers no real answers to the viewer. Every gesture is weighted with a performative gravitas, from the casual hand tucked into a spotless pocket to the slow, deliberate lifting of a cup of tea, an item that represents not just a moment of quiet reflection, but a carefully placed product within a sprawling, yet seemingly chaotic, commercial empire. This performance leaves us asking what exactly is being communicated, what subtle signals are being telegraphed to a global audience. and why a brand property that once commanded immense market value and the advice of the most expensive public relations firms in the world has resorted to an approach that feels so profoundly amateurish. Like throwing a bucket of mud against a wall in the desperate hope that something will finally stick. As the digital heat rises and the conversation intensifies across social media platforms and traditional newspaper columns, a parallel narrative of decline and shifting tides begins to emerge beneath the glossy surface of these pristine video clips, revealing a stark contrast between curated perfection and numerical reality. While the public engages in fierce debates over the aesthetic merits of these surreal lifestyle vignettes, data analysts and media insiders are tracking a far more serious phenomenon occurring behind the digital curtain, where website traffic for high-profile personal brands is falling off a steep cliff as part of a much larger systemic shift in how information is consumed in the modern age. The rise of advanced artificial intelligence search models has fundamentally rewritten the rules of the internet, creating a landscape where users no longer need to click through to official websites to find content, effectively decimating the traditional metrics of online engagement and leaving even the largest media empires scrambling to survive a devastating drop in global traffic. In this hyper-competitive environment, where traditional platforms are being systematically dismantled by technological evolution, the reliance on bizarre, self-indulgent visual spectacles becomes a fascinating study in desperation. An erratic pivot away from structured corporate branding and back toward the raw, unadulterated cult of personality. It raises profound questions about the long-term viability of a media strategy that seems to swing wildly between attempting to broaden its appeal through professional influencers and then suddenly retreating into the familiar territory of narcissistic self-portraiture within a single week. This erratic behavior suggests a profound loss of nerve behind the scenes, a chaotic struggle to maintain relevance and financial stability in a world that has rapidly grown exhausted by the endless cycle of reinvention, setting the stage for a much larger, high-stakes journey across the Atlantic that could either cement a long-awaited reconciliation or signal the absolute final act of a collapsing global brand. The delicate thread that connects a crumbling commercial empire in the hills of Montecito to the ancient limestone corridors of the British monarchy is spun from equal parts financial urgency and a relentless, burning desire for public vindication. As the digital illusion of independent global stardom begins to fracture under the weight of dwindling website traffic and terminated streaming contracts, the focus inevitably shifts back toward the one geographic landscape that can still bestow authentic, historical credibility upon its runaway children. This pending return to the United Kingdom is not merely a casual summer holiday or a routine family visit, but a calculated, high-stakes maneuver born out of a profound sense of isolation and institutional failure. A reality that seasoned royal biographers summarize in the starkest terms as a mixture of absolute desperation and structural ruin. The reality is that the independent media dream, which began with such triumphant fanfares and multi-million-dollar promises several years ago, has hit a wall of absolute indifference, leaving the principal actors with a depleted well of creative concepts and a balance sheet that faces long-term structural jeopardy. To restore the luster of a heavily tarnished reputation, to reclaim the global status that was so casually discarded, a physical convergence with the British royal family is increasingly viewed not just as a desperate necessity, but as the absolute final lifeline available to a brand that is rapidly flatlining in the competitive arenas of American entertainment. The upcoming journey across the Atlantic is therefore charged with immense tension. serving as the backdrop for an intense game of psychological chess between a palace that demands absolute submission and a couple who have mastered the art of turning every single news cycle into a personal shop window. Beneath the grand strategic maneuvers lies a fascinating, highly specific subplot that has set the digital underground ablaze with intense speculation, a narrative thread that connects this modern media spectacle to the enduring, haunting legacy of the late Princess of Wales. While mainstream media outlets struggle to keep pace with the hyper-accelerated speed of online investigative communities, eagle-eyed observers have unraveled a series of chronological coincidences that point toward an incredibly ambitious, highly lucrative media project centered around the childhood home and final resting place of Princess Diana. The sudden, unexplained closure of the historic Althorp estate over the exact dates corresponding with a major upcoming public event in the United Kingdom has fueled intense theories that a comprehensive documentary feature is quietly being filmed within its secluded historic grounds. This is a landscape deeply etched into the collective memory of the public, an isolated island sanctuary where the legendary princess was laid to rest, surrounded by waters that protect her memory from the voyeuristic gaze of the outside world. Yet it is now poised to become the ultimate backdrop for a fresh wave of commercialized narrative spin. Royal insiders recall the vivid, highly dramatic descriptions from published memoirs where the Duke of Sussex describes rowing his future wife over to this sacred island, leaving her to commune with the spirit of his late mother in a performance marked by pressed palms against the gravestone and deep theatrical reverie. The prospect of utilizing this deeply sensitive, highly emotional family history for a multi-million-dollar streaming production reveals the sheer depth of the financial anxieties driving the current operation, transforming a sacred site of private grief into a potential asset for an ongoing global marketing campaign. This frantic reliance on past royal associations stands in stark, almost tragic contrast to the erratic marketing strategies being deployed across the Atlantic, where the brand seems to be suffering from a profound crisis of identity and an absolute lack of long-term commercial discipline. Only a short week prior to the bizarre, self-indulgently theatrical summer fruit basket presentation, the underlying lifestyle company had attempted a significantly more sophisticated, highly professional approach to modern digital merchandising. They had introduced a polished, articulate video campaign featuring a striking, highly capable lifestyle influencer who effectively stepped into the role of a brand doppelganger, gracefully demonstrating the art of hosting, lighting floral candles, and spreading premium raspberry jam with an elegance that didn't rely on the divisive cult of personality. This strategic move was hailed by industry experts as a rare moment of corporate maturity, a sensible attempt to decouple the commercial products from the heavy, often radioactive baggage of the primary owner, mirroring the successful evolutionary playbooks of major global lifestyle giants who recognize that a brand can only truly grow when it ceases to be a mere vehicle for an individual's personal ego. Yet, in an act of staggering corporate instability, this disciplined approach was entirely abandoned within 7 days, replaced by a chaotic retreat into the familiar amateurish tropes of narcissistic self-portraiture, highlighting an absolute failure to hold their nerve or maintain a consistent commercial trajectory. It is this constant, unpredictable oscillation between professional corporate structure and erratic, self-absorbed vanity that leaves the market utterly bewildered, exposing a brand that is operating entirely without a map, swinging wildly from one half-baked concept to another in a desperate bid to capture a fleeting moment of viral attention, as the pieces of this complex puzzle begin to assemble themselves on the global stage. The overarching question that dominates the international media conversation is who will ultimately emerge victorious from this impending, highly controversial convergence of the rogue royals and the British state. The final outcome of this summer drama depends entirely on the specific terms of the physical settlement, the degree of institutional discipline maintained, and whether the return is conducted under the strict, unyielding protocols of the Crown or the unregulated terms of a commercial media circus. If the returning prince flies into the United Kingdom to accept his sovereign father's hospitality, residing quietly under a royal roof, accepting the official security apparatus of the state, and maintaining an absolute, disciplined silence regarding internal family dynamics, the palace will have achieved a profound, historic victory. This quiet submission would represent the ultimate realization of the institution's original objective, demonstrating to the world that while individuals are entirely free to pursue independent commercial wealth, they must ultimately bend the knee to the absolute supremacy and discipline of the Crown when operating within its ancient sovereign sphere. However, if the upcoming visit is transformed into yet another unvarnished opportunity for personal monetization, marked by highly publicized leaks, opportunistic email marketing campaigns, and transactional interactions designed solely to elevate an independent commercial entity, it will represent a devastating capitulation by the monarchy. To reward absolute defiance, to grant a royal palace and a personal audience with a reigning monarch to individuals who have systematically dismantled the formal treaties of their institutional departure, would send a message of profound weakness, signaling to the world that the Crown can be effectively leveraged and manipulated for personal financial gain. To truly comprehend the institutional mechanics behind this extraordinary collision of personal vanity and ancient statecraft, one must look back at the historical precedents that have quietly governed the British monarchy for generations, revealing a highly sophisticated pattern of behavioral correction that has been applied to wayward royals before. Decades ago, long before the advent of modern social media algorithms and high-stakes streaming wars, another young prince sought to escape what he perceived as the stifling, ribbon-cutting monotony of traditional royal duty in a desperate bid to carve out an independent commercial media career in the modern world. In the early 1990s, Prince Edward, the late Queen's youngest son, established an independent television production company with grand ambitions of global media dominance. Entirely convinced that his royal identity could be successfully leveraged into a profitable commercial enterprise without compromising the dignity of his family. The reality of that venture proved to be a spectacular, multi-million-pound disaster, characterized by severe financial losses, critical mockery, and a series of profound institutional embarrassments that culminated in a blatant violation of his own nephew's privacy at university, leaving the senior leadership of the palace absolutely incandescent with rage. Faced with total financial ruin and the collapse of his independent media dream, the prince had no choice but to fold his commercial ambitions, abandon his corporate entity, and quietly crawl back to the disciplined, unglamorous routine of full-time institutional service. Over the subsequent 2 decades, through a process of absolute submission and relentless, quiet hard work, he systematically laundered his public image from a desperate commercial opportunist into a deeply safe, reliable, and hard-working servant of the state, eventually being rewarded with his late father's historic title as the Duke of Edinburgh. This historical process of institutional absorption, a phenomenon where the sprawling apparatus of the Crown slowly grows around a foreign, disruptive body and sucks it back into a state of total behavioral compliance, is precisely how the palace prefers to resolve existential threats to its continuity. The monarchy rarely seeks to permanently cast out its prodigal children. Instead, it utilizes a highly calculated strategy of economic and social attrition. waiting patiently for the harsh realities of the commercial marketplace to erode the independent viability of the rogue entity until submission becomes the only logical path forward. For the Duke of Sussex, the indicators of this exhaustion have become overwhelmingly clear to anyone tracking his behavioral patterns, domestic choices, and public statements over the past several years, pointing to a man who is profoundly weary of his self-imposed exile in the United States. Despite the endless, glossy narratives of Californian bliss broadcast to the public, his actual existence in America is defined by a profound absence of core institutional purpose, a total lack of substantial local charitable networks, and a complete reliance on UK-based organizations, security battles, and legal frameworks to maintain any semblance of global relevance. His core operational team, his primary press office, his veteran charities, and his international sustainable travel initiatives remain firmly anchored within the geographic boundaries of the United Kingdom, leaving him stranded in a cultural landscape where he has no real job, no historical grounding, and an underlying terror regarding the safety and education of his young children. Every significant action he takes, from subtle symbolic gestures in his public communications to direct admissions regarding his longing for the unique camaraderie of his homeland, screams of a desperate desire to negotiate a permanent path back into the protective embrace of the British state. Yet, the ultimate barrier to this long-awaited institutional resolution remains the profound, seemingly irreconcilable divide between a prince who wishes to return to his historical roots and a spouse whose entire commercial viability is predicated on maintaining a high-stakes, highly performative conflict with the very institution that granted her global fame. While the reigning monarch, driven by deep parental affection and a traditional desire to stabilize his family legacy, reportedly longs for a comprehensive reconciliation that would bury the hatchet for the good of the crown. This soft-soaping approach risks alienating a British public that has grown deeply resentful of the endless attacks leveled against their cultural heritage. Recent statistical data reveals a worrying, highly significant decline in public support for the monarchy itself, a direct consequence of the palace's perceived failure to decisively handle internal crises, manage radioactive family assets, or maintain a strict, unyielding standard of institutional accountability. If the sovereign chooses to reward years of public hostility, corporate exploitation, and institutional betrayal with a highly publicized, full-face family photograph designed to project an illusion of harmony, it would trigger absolute uproar across the nation, fracturing the deep bond of trust between the working public and a crown that is meant to represent unyielding duty over transactional celebrity. The public demands a clear, unambiguous boundary between the selfless, dignified, soft power of working royals who dedicate their lives to serving vulnerable communities and the synthetic, profit-driven spectacle of those who utilize their titles as a mere marketing tool to sell premium lifestyle goods from a sun-drenched estate across the sea. This profound division between authentic public service and curated commercial vanity was brought into razor-sharp focus during the very week this surreal lifestyle video captivated the digital world, as senior members of the royal family executed a series of deeply moving, highly impactful state engagements that underscored the true meaning of institutional power. While independent lifestyle brands were busy polishing their rustic wicker baskets and calculating the profit margins on $14 cups of tea, the Prince of Wales was actively leveraging his global environmental foundation alongside international cultural leaders to drive systemic solutions to the global climate crisis, demonstrating a level of global leadership that extends far beyond the boundaries of a personal digital feed. Simultaneously, the king himself sat down within the quiet, historic rooms of Clarence House to receive the members of the Afghan refugee women's cricket team. Individuals who had been smuggled out of their homeland under running death threats from a brutal regime that sought to erase their very existence from the fabric of society. Listening with genuine, unforced empathy to their terrifying journey through hostile checkpoints and their ongoing struggle to be recognized on the international sporting stage, the sovereign offered the soft, dignified power of the British Crown to validate their human rights and celebrate their extraordinary resilience in the face of absolute tyranny. This is the stark, undeniable contrast that defines the modern media landscape. On one side stands a lifetime of quiet institutional dignity driven by a profound sense of national duty, and on the other sits a highly calculated, deeply artificial marketing campaign designed to transform personal privilege into private profit. As the curtain falls on this chaotic chapter of modern cultural history, the public is left with an easy choice between the enduring substance of a sovereign state and the hollow, flatlining illusion of a commercial fruit basket wandering aimlessly through the hills of California.